Everybody, my name is Mary Heckissel, and I'm with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. And we have organized this meeting today because it's such an important topic, but I always love to just take a minute and welcome you to our premise here. We're always glad to have everybody gather. We do a lot of these programs online, but it is nice to be together from time to time. So thank you for coming out on a rainy day. Our group is all about trying to just build support for one another in marketing and the life sciences. So we have probably 8 to 9 different programs that we host throughout the year. Most of them are online, as I mentioned, but this one is a very important topic. So I just want to say thank you very much to our moderator, Keith Duprey, for approaching me on this topic and saying, what do you think about doing this? Thank you to the survey participants. We're going to hear about those survey results today. We're going to have time for a Q&A and everything. So welcome also to all of our participants online. We have people monitoring the chat. So as you have questions, we'll be able to address those in the Q&A section. So, okay. And I did also want to mention that we are planning a June program. You'll be getting some information about that shortly. Watch out on email. It's probably going to be the end of June 4th. If I had to pinpoint it. So without further ado, I introduce Keith Duprey, principal from the Marketing Strategist.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you all very much, especially Adrian and Patrick for helping put this together as well. Yeah, so I have dabbled in AI in various capacities over the last, I guess, 7 to 8 years. But as a marketing strategist, it's really clear that AI is absolutely making a huge impact in marketing. And it's stuff that we have to be prepared for. Lots of confusion, lots of being overwhelmed, lots of opportunity. So it's a really exciting time for sure, but there's so much left to be figured out. So with that, we have a really simple agenda. We're going to review our survey results. And again, thank you to everyone who took the time to fill out the survey. We'll do panel introductions at that time and actually go through many of the questions that came up in the actual survey. So if that's okay, we'll keep our questions till our panelists, the panel, and we'll have Q&A at the end. Certainly people online are able to go ahead and start to put their questions in the chat, and we'll have that queued up as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to go pretty quickly through the survey results. So who participated in the survey? About half were a mix of senior leaders, which again is kind of interesting in that it maps to the larger national trend where most people who are experimenting with AI in any capacity tend to be more senior level people. There's some adjacent roles following up at 41% sales, HR, and agency, and the remainder being mid-level specialist marketing roles, et cetera. Again, very similar to what you'd see national trends, both in a marketing sector, but also in some other industries. We had a small sample size, but this is, again, pretty indicative of where we are as a group and really as an industry. So where are we on the AI journey? So, all right, let's do a show of hands. How many people here are using AI on a daily basis? Excellent. How many are using it for generating copy or content? Excellent. How many of you are using it for data analysis? Excellent. How many of you are using it to create surveys for AI and marketing panel groups? I mean, it's really remarkable. I mean, of course, we all know, and I'm so grateful this is happening at this stage in my career where I've actually live a good long time in marketing, but it is such a great tool to use to really go out and get most, I like to say 60 to 70% of it correct as far as tell me what would be some really thoughtful questions to ask a group on AI and marketing with life sciences. And it just brings back such rich information. And then we can work together. And actually, Crystal was very helpful and some conversations we had brought up some points it didn't bring up, which was really, so it's just that it's a great collaborative tool. When we look at the actual data here, there's about 53% of our survey respondents who are using it internally. There are 24% who aren't using it at all. There are about 18% using or who are evaluating AI solutions. And then there's 6% that's working with the vendor who's using AI. which is interesting. Again, depending on who was filling out the survey, and we saw it was a lot of leaders, depending on the size of the agency, they may not be actually using a vendor. But we know that a lot of marketing vendors are certainly using AI to some degree in really responsible ways. So the majority are engaged with AI or actively exploring it, but a lot of people understandably feel like we're in the early stages, right? And things are changing very quickly. But few see AI as fully integrated or strategically transformative yet. How are you using it today? And we did a little poll. Not surprising, overwhelmingly, 80% of our survey respondents were using it for content generation. And that, again, is kind of very similar to the trends nationally. SEO optimization, 40%, predictive analytics, 30%, chatbots, customer engagement, 30%, and ad targeting personalization, 20%. So initial focus is heavily on leveraging AI for practical, kind of operational, efficiency-driven tasks. But there's obviously, from a creative standpoint, content creation is important. So there's a lot of risk, and we'll learn from our panelists that each of us have different kind of outlooks on AI, or one word to explain what we think about AI. But there are lots of risk associated with it. From an institutional AI policy, do you have a policy? And 60% of the people responding said, no, we don't have a formal policy. Do you have a policy in development? Only 30%. Is there a comprehensive policy? And there was a small sample size, but about 10% of the people said, yes, we do have a fairly formal, cohesive AI policy. On the kind of intellectual property protection measures, right, which is a critical thing that we must be concerned about, is what you're putting in, especially if you're in a public machine learning or large language model. You have to be really thoughtful about that. So there's 50% aren't really taking any specific measures to protect their IP. Some are using tools that already have built-in privacy or security features at 30%. Some have strict internal guidelines at 20%. Some are actually just using it from a task standpoint of maybe anonymizing, redacting data. And then there are contractual agreements with vendors. They're using AI for that as well, 20%. And the key takeaway is that there still is significant gaps that exist in formal AI policies and IP protection practices. So the learning curve, so understanding and confidence from the survey. We've filled out the survey. So, do you have an understanding of open versus closed AI? And again, generally low to moderate understanding of what that really does mean and what the benefits are, what the challenges are with either one of these types of approaches. And then your confidence in evaluating AI tech, about 60% feel somewhat confident or not confident, and only 18% felt confident or very confident in actually in evaluating that for some particular tactic. So there's a clear need for increased technical literacy and confidence in assessing and selecting AI tools for marketing. I don't think we'll get that deep today to that degree, but there's going to be a lot of good information shared that will start to actually help you think through that a little bit better. The biggest hurdles to AI adoption, thankfully we're having this, so we'll start to all kind of get to a certain level of baseline with these types of conversations about understanding the types of AI tools that are out there. How are people using them? What are the pitfalls? There's definitely needs to be some more training. There's a lack of trust in AI's accuracy, and that's absolutely real. Like, you really do have to look through whatever you're asking it to do and make sure that it's actually reporting or giving you back the information that is helpful and correct. There's a lack of understanding. There's a lack of resources and budget that are associated with how you're paying, or what's the ROI of AI. And of course, especially in life sciences, we have to be really concerned of regulatory or compliance concerns. The big takeaway is the primary perceived barrier is a skills and knowledge gap, and closely followed by concerns about trust and accuracy, which are really a big deal when you come to thinking about people's lives. So what do we want AI to achieve? This makes a lot of sense. Automate repetitive tasks. When I had the chance to work with Mitch at Blue Cross on a model he built for use there, and what we felt when we started talking about AI or any type of automation, people were kind of a little afraid of what exactly was happening. And really what we try to say is, if there's low value repetitive tasks, that is the perfect task to use AI or automation on. that allows people to then focus on real value added conversations or work. That's really the kind of huge benefit that many people see with AI. There's the ability to gain actual insights by, looking at large data sets and being able to really digest it to kind of actionable insights. Reducing marketing cost, improving marketing ROI, again, where your campaigns are maybe a little bit more targeted, or you're basing your outreach or message based on how they've interacted with your site. So there's just the ability to increase ROI there. Increased revenue. I'm not sure we're quite there yet on the whole, from a marketing standpoint, and then predict customer behavior. And the group is primarily seeking tangible operational benefits, efficiency, improved data utilization for those insights. So to recap, there again, our high adoption rates are reported globally. Common use cases mirror our findings: content creation, personalization, data analysis, and automation. And there is increased investment expected. From a life science context, it is accelerating across many of the entire organization, right? For R&D, drug discovery, operations, et cetera. And marketing does face unique challenges with strict regulatory environments, need for scientific accuracy, and being very thoughtful about high value sensitivity of data and IP. And life science teams have specific concerns around regulatory compliance, data privacy, IP protection, and the scientific authenticity of the AI output, and are likely more pronounced and critical than in many other industries, presenting a significant challenge and focus area for life science marketing. So that was the survey results. Maybe I'll take a second. Anything there that was shocking to anybody, or anything that was, yeah. Again, it was when I looked at McKinsey, AI Marketing Institute, and a number of other resources. It was pretty similar. So here are the top questions that came out of it, and this is what we'll be talking through with our panel today. How to balance compliance ethics with relevant marketing efforts using AI. How to ensure data quality, authenticity, and IP protection. What are proven practical use cases and tools specifically for life science marketing? How do we effectively go from piloting to scaling AI adoption? And what's the real ROI? How do we build trust and overcome the lack of understanding training? So I'll want to, again, thank our panelists for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come and speak with us today. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, a little bit about their roles, their current companies they're with, and maybe one word that they would say describes how they're thinking about AI right now. Matt, if we start with you?
Sure.
Should we close the microphone?
No. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mitch Quinn. I'm the director of AI and machine learning at NCBiotech. Believe it or not, I've been doing AI for over 20 years now, which is, it's evolved a lot since those days. My hair has also gotten a lot grayer since those days. But so in my role at NCBiotech, I lead the AI teams that build solutions. We're focused on healthcare. We serve both payers and providers. In addition to that role of leading the AI development and the clinical validation of the models that we build, I also support the AI practice in our consultancy at large. So what we do is build the competency and capability for all of our brilliant software engineers and computer scientists to be able to make AI just a tool in their arsenal that they can bring to bear. I don't believe it's anything necessarily special. There's some thing that should be held up on a pedestal, but it's a tool for a job. I think if you've worked in something for 20 years, the shininess and the newness is worn off of it. And so you become much more pragmatic. And I think that approach leads us to seek things that are much more durable and than just chasing the latest shining thing. So, excited to join you here on the panel and tell you more.
Thanks for including me. Of the group, I am definitely the skeptic and crabby, like old man yells at clouds about AI. I am CEO of Group 31 Communications. We are in life science communications, so helping early stage companies be able to explain their science in a way that makes sense to an investor, and then all the way through the life cycle of that product, ultimately being able to explain how the science works, what the disease is, what the product is to a healthcare provider and ultimately a patient. I think the one word answer that I have about AI is risky.
Hello, is it afternoon? Hello, good afternoon. My name is Liza Rivera and I work for SK Pharmteco, which you probably have never heard of. SK Pharmteco is a contract development and manufacturing organization. It's owned by SK Inc., which is the second largest conglomerate in South Korea after Samsung. So they have multiple businesses. And we are the CDMO branch of SK Inc. We cover everything from small molecule to cell and gene therapies, very strong analytics. And it's a combination of different brands that have come together in the recent years. So I have an exciting, very challenging job along with the team that I lead to build the brand. So I'm looking forward to that. And I am an AI lover. I use it. I have been studying it. I want to implement it. And I think it's going to be transformative with time.
Awesome. Thank you. So one of the first questions I want to start with, maybe you, Mitch, and of course, any of the panel, is to talk about the different types of AI. There's a lot of nomenclature coming at us about generative AI, agentic AI, there's transformative AI, all sorts of AI. So how would you help this group think about the types of AI and their applications?
Yeah, so I guess having seen it evolve for, over the course of my career, it's just one building on top of another, right? So if you think about predictive AI, you're predicting a specific outcome. You work with data scientists, you have large amounts of data to solve your problem that you have a very impactful answer for. And you understand that model really, really well. You train a very specific model for a specific task. Like that's evolved, right? And generative AI is built on top of that, where it's predicting the next word and then learning how to form those next words and continue a train of thought and into something that is pleasing, right? Not necessarily right, which we'll get into, I'm sure. Yeah, but it sounds plausible. That sounds pretty good. Let's go with it. But these models are much more general in nature. You don't have to train a specific one for, a specific outcome. And that has led to the big explosion and the democratization, and everybody's been exposed to it. It's like, wow, I can use this thing from ChatGPT and it does what feels like a pretty good job. And so that's led us kind of to where we are now, right? Where there are all these use cases that seem possible and seem like within reach. And that we've gotten a little ahead of our skis in some ways, in some applications, and people have been in trouble for doing so. And so I think what we're all interested in now is everybody's been exposed to it. How do we approach these uses of what we have now so that we can really take advantage of the capability they represent without exposing us to unnecessary downside risks? So, I mean, generative AI is somewhat more generic. It's, general purpose, but it also leads you into those closed versus open scenarios where you don't know what's lying underneath. Whereas the older models, you can analyze the bias in the data. You can compensate for the bias in the data. You can create models that are trustworthy. And the closed models, not so much. So you have to keep them at arm's length and make sure that you're not exposing yourself to undue risk.
So Liza, do you guys want to add to that?
I think the most important part for companies like ours in the life sciences is the open versus closed. That is something that I have been considering and throwing ideas to my team and to people. Maybe they get a little bit scared. But having a closed database where it's specific to your company. Imagine if you're creating a marketing piece or marketing messages, and I don't know how many of you have had to go and hunt for information. How many square feet is this building? Where is it? Like, we waste so much time like looking for information. And if you had an internal tool where you're feeding everything from the medicines we're making to their indication to what clinical phase to whatever you can think of, and all you have to do is then find me this information, create it for me, and you can trust it. Now, a closed system, and I'm sure that you can validate or dispute this, but you have to constantly feed it, right? It's not like you're going to have, an internal AI tool that if you're not constantly keeping it updated, at some point it's going to stop working the way you want it to. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, like training a model and keeping it relevant is important, right? And so I think for all of those really strategic things where you're making decisions upon which you have to be right, or you at least have to know how far you can trust the model, right? This is 95% accurate. You've entered that into a use case where the cost of being wrong, and you can trust it at this level. That's the challenge with generative AI, is that we don't have those rigorous evaluations of the models for your specific use case. And I think that's something that we've shortcut away from when we build these, going from the traditional, like, you build a model for this purpose, you know how it works, you're only going to use it for this one thing. It's so much more understood, whereas now everybody's using it for everything. It feels right, but you can't really rely upon or trust it for a high impact.
Well, and I think that's really key, especially as we're trying to figure out how do we utilize this tool in general, is we've got to actually back up and make sure that everybody that is in our companies understands what these terms are. Yeah. That there is a policy set for how you feed information in, or what is considered the right tool to use for what you're doing, and have that policy evaluated and updated. I mean, I don't know how you would possibly keep up with updating that policy. In my organization, we look at policies about every year or so, but that's clearly not enough in AI. And thinking through life science and copyright protection, IP protection, confidentiality, figuring out how do you arm your team with the right tools, and you're not accidentally exposing company data or patient data into the world. And so also making sure that you've got your attorneys looking at that.
Well, yeah, I think that's an important, like, the policy is like key, right? But you also have to make, everybody read the book Nudge. It's like engineering decisions to make the right thing, the easy thing, right? Once you have decided on what's an acceptable risk and acceptable use, right? You find those tools that can leverage that, and then you put them in the hands of your people, because they're going to use them, whether you have a policy or not. They're going to use it on their phone, and then they're going to copy paste it. So you want to make the right thing the easy thing, and make that the low friction approach, so that you aren't exposed, because the risk of doing nothing and not having that policy opens you up to a complete unknown Pandora's box of IP leakage and PHI leakage, HIPAA violations, and so forth, right? So there's that. That's what we do, right? We evaluate these tools. You'll have somebody that's like, okay, what is the policy for this this ChatGPT Teams account? Do they train on your data? Is it SOC 2 Type 2 compliant? Is it HIPAA compliant? Is it, and then you say what can and can't be put into them, right?
Well, and also keeping track then of what the company has ownership of, right? Like if you read the terms of use, I mean, I'm sure that lots of folks are using Canva right now. If you make your company logo using Canva's support, you don't own your logo. Canva does. And so making sure that you're reading the terms of use and recognizing that they're going to change over time. So anything that you're using, you also have to be making sure that you're reviewing what their rules are as well.
I think another thing that's important when you're using AI, it goes both ways. So there has to be a level of transparency as you're speaking with your customers so that they know that AI is part of your organization. I think that's very early and it depends on, I'm B2B, we work under confidentiality, we work with customers, it is to give them that peace of mind that if we are using AI, which I think marketing is the team that's mostly using it right now. But there are discussions of bringing it in, but if you're using it, how we're using it and how your data is not going there or,
It
just.
stays yours, or it's between us.
Exactly, it's a closed system, it's not going into a Gen AI, all of those things. And so it's something to keep in mind.
Like using the public free tools is a dangerous thing. I think you have to have what you give up is that you're the customer when you're the product when you're the free tool. If you're paying for it, then that allows you to protect the data. That allows you to be cognizant of the data that of your exposure, and you still maintain control over it.
To the extent that that company does their job, right? Like there's, I mean, and we had talked about this some on the prep call, like 23andMe, the people that were sending in their DNA, 5 years ago, were probably not expecting that was going to get sold to Regeneron. And so remembering that what's in the terms of use today and the protections that are there today are maybe not going to be the same tomorrow.
Right.
And we're still depending on the people building the system, building it in the best possible way and never making a mistake.
But I mean, it's always a people problem, isn't it? I mean, it's, we build these like highly impactful AI models and we're really proud of them. We're excited about what they're able to do. But the AI model doesn't really do anything. It's the people that do the work, right? And I think that's it is a people thing. And I think understanding all the domains that these things touch is the core.
We saw in the survey, 80% of the people surveyed were saying they were using it for content generation. And thinking through the people that were taking the survey are life science marketing interested at a minimum. And so are those people super well versed in everything that they're creating well enough that they can look at something and know that the model hasn't hallucinated?
So I think that's the other question of how do you use them, right? I think that was one of the topics is like, how do you make use of them in the right way? And like relying on it to be an expert on something that you don't know is really dangerous because it'll sound really plausible and you'll go, yeah, that sounds a lot better than I could come up with, ship it. So, the examples that I like to think of are, you remember like when you're making a logo or something and you would go to a graphic designer and get some ideas and you get this panel of things and you get all these different variations. You go, well, this one, that one. And you sort of mix them together and, okay, let's iterate on that one. Let's do another generation that's sort of variations on this theme, right? You can kind of what you're looking for. It's just that communication gap and the iteration process is a really valuable thing. Work with your generative AI tools in that manner is a good way to, you're still exerting editorial control. Everyone can be an editor and you still know what you're looking for. If you don't know what you're looking for, that's when it opens you up to being like really dangerous. If you've read an article, you need a 150-word summary. to fit in a blurb for a thing that you're going to put on, or you can, and if you know what you need and you're familiar with it, generative AI can do a great job at like hammering out a 150 word summary. You can tweak it, exert your language or tone control over it. And that's a very quick efficiency gain that you can then use. But if you haven't read the article
Exactly.
and you ask it to summarize it for you, go, well, sounds good to me.
Well, it's like and I'm gonna quote one of my colleagues. It's like you have a calculator, and if you don't know how to do math, it's useless, right? So to me, that's an analogy when you think about AI, is you need to not only know how to use it, but learn to identify when it has been used. Because when it comes to content, and maybe, I don't know, I don't want to get too far from the track that you're going, but when you come to content, I mean, how many of you can tell it's been written by AI? I can spot it in a second, because a lot of people suddenly are delving into things, you know?
A lot of M dash.
And where did these emojis come from? Like, they're, I think it was the serpent emoji, and like this crazy, like,
Wow.
so again, if you are using it, like, there's words I don't ever want to see, and they trigger me if I see them, you know?
And there's a lot of reason behind that, and it's how they were trained and how they were, they've learned that they gravitate towards the specific vocabularies, which is kind of wild, right? My kids, so one of the biggest pejoratives you could say is like, you sound like a bot, right? And that's like one of the other risks. It's not just like, it's not just IP leakage, but this homogenization of content, and it just becomes what's referred to as slop, right? It's just like AI slop. It's very low value, it's very high volume, and you fade into you become the spam, you get filtered out. Everybody just stops listening.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the.
I think we've talked about it, the flattening of the creative process to some degree, right? If you're just depending on it. Let's shift gears to thinking about some quick wins or some ways that you can avoid some of the scarier parts of AI, but embrace, and we've been talking a few of them. Chris, I'm not sure if you have any things that you're doing for your clients or for your company.
Yeah, so I mean, I just used it 2 weeks ago to pull our LinkedIn engagement metrics from the past year to see what were the kinds of posts that got the most engagement, what had the most comments, things like that, as I was working with the team to plan out our strategy for the next year to see, we saw that our post that we made about our team going to a baseball game was really high. And the stuff that we posted about me being a crab about something, probably AI related, didn't trend as well, shockingly. And so being able to take insights like that and speed up that process to be able to help us do faster decision making and planning, I think has been really helpful. Me personally, I have been sort of playing with it again, LinkedIn related, looking to see, all right, so my company posted this, I'm out of words for today, and I need to reshare this post and write a 3-sentence whatever and then I'll take that as a starting point. But it's still, at the end of it, it's still me, because to your point, it believes truly everything. It truly delve deeply.
Yes. Extraordinary.
Truly extraordinary.
Truly extraordinary, yes.
What about tools like for social media or for CRM or even like website optimization? Is anyone using those tools?
We have Zoom info, which is linked to our CRM. To be 100% honest, don't ask me too many questions about it because I'm just learning about it. And of course, if you're using Canva, there's applications in there. If you're using platforms such as Hootsuite, Hootsuite has embedded AI that can not only provide the data that you're searching, but also can do your sentiment screening and keep track of how your company's doing. That's very, very, very useful. So I would say those are some examples of applications and tools that you can use.
I think subject lines too, generating,
Yes.
several subject lines so you can do A/B testing so that you're staying within the character counts that you need. But essentially, like, this is the general thing that I want to say, write 4 subject lines about it.
And of course, there's ChatGPT, which, I really want to talk about ChatGPT and Gemini and even Copilot whenever is the time to talk about that.
Sure.
Because I was really, really shocked at the results of the survey about the use of AI. There was one thing missing in there, and I want to talk about that. Should I talk about it now? It's a search engine. Think of ChatGPT as your next Google. People are not using Google as much. If you track Google, you have seen that their shares went down for the first time in I don't know how many years. I personally, if I want to find something, what is Bad Bunny's birthday? It will give it to me, So and I did an experiment. I put my company name and I didn't put my company name. I said, which are the top CDMOs in, the small molecule space? And we were not coming. I said, well, what are the next 10? And I'm just kind of going insane. Why is this happening? We have our SEO optimized and we don't have a Wikipedia page. Okay. And that may sound, by the way, we're building one. That may sound like something ridiculous, but AI is pulling content from sources, Wikipedia being one of the biggest ones. So as a marketer, you need to go see, do we have a Wikipedia page? Is it up to date? Are we getting cited and published in reliable sources so that the engine starts pulling your information on? So
were you using the web search, the web button on ChatGPT for that, or was it just a regular prompt?
both.
Yeah, so there's a big difference
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah. Both. So, but the reality is that the more comfortable people get it, and this Gen Alpha and Gen Z, like, they don't Google. They go to you have to think about the demographics too. Now, in a B2B right now might be different for a B2C if you're selling to consumers. Like, think about, how you reframe your marketing strategy to incorporate it. Do you need to be spending so much money in SEO versus optimizing your content for it to be picked up by AI? And there's very specific ways of doing that, how it's almost a bit academic, if you will, in how you do it.
And those, like that chat optimization is going to vary, and it's going to be very dynamic because those arrangements, like OpenAI has preferential sources that it will go to, and those are ever changing and subject to like contracts that they're entering into. And so it's not as transparent as something that was blindly crawling the web, right? And just indexing based on how things are connected to each other, as the way search engine optimization was done.
Well, and as we're seeing more, learning models talking to each other, and more slop being created, my concern is that it's not able to see the difference between a Reddit post and what's in the British Medical Journal and what's on, Corner Joe pharmacy blog.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is one of the credibility assignment problems that they're trying to overcome by saying, let's go to sources that have some journalistic integrity, and not, like Reddit jokes that tell you to eat rocks as part of your daily, diet, like Google got in trouble for a little while ago.
With that, and I fully agree, because I have seen some things being spit out where it's like, where did this come from? And then I say, where is the source? Give me the source. And then you trust but verified.
Yeah.
And to your point, you can't believe everything it spits out. I've seen data that comes, and I'm like, where is this coming from? And then eventually you keep asking it, it will tell you, well, this is just, and that doesn't use the word assumption, it uses a different word, but this is like basically an educated guess.
So like a little insight, like how these models are trained, right? Is you start with all the text on the internet and it's trained to predict the next word. Like it starts with the beginning and predicts the next word. And then it takes that and tries to predict the word after that. And so it learns to follow this train of thought. That's the starting point. And that was something that was like very familiar back in 2018. What you had at that point was a model that would just babble. It would just babble and it wasn't answering questions. It wasn't a chat. It was just continuing the train of thought that it was interpreting. Then they started tuning it for chat interactions by asking it to say, we gave it feedback. And it's like, did you like this response better or that response better? You get two options. And you could say this was better, that was worse. It didn't say which was more correct. It just gave you, it was trained to learn what people liked to hear more. That's why they're so sycophantic, right? Is that, you love to hear great things about yourself. Ask it to tell you something about yourself. You'll feel great because that's what it's trained on. It's like, you want a boost? Yeah, it's not going to tear you down. It's going to build you up.
Speaking of making people feel great, customer service and chatbots in general. Anything happening in your world with those as far as?
I need to say something about this. We specifically don't have it. I think you have to be very, very careful with chatbots. I mean, to the point that you can actually annoy and aggravate a customer to the point that they will leave your website. So I just,
Poorly implemented.
yeah.
No, I do think there's an absolute time and place for them. I mean, clearly, many people have used the Department of Transportation's North Carolina, which is amazing.
Very good.
Right? It's very good. And it's like 5 years old. So anyway, but I did hear recently of AI taking a number of basic questions before it would forward you to a human. And if it got it wrong, it would then listen in the background to understand what the answer was from the human. So it was constantly learning, which is kind of fascinating that it's doing that. And again, as a sales and marketing person, I care very much about being able to qualify and direct that person to the right place. When that happens and it's done well, it's exquisite.
Yes.
But it's just very rarely does it happen correctly.
So the ways that we're seeing it help with customer service is if they have information retrieval challenges where they might be plugged into 17 different systems, right? Is behind the scenes, how can you leverage generative AI or more effective search to provide them with a single interface to find that information and deliver it to them, not generate an answer, not open the door to hallucination and giving nonsensical things, but getting them to the ground truth information that's created by the humans that is the real answer that they can then use to provide to, as that intermediary to the customers. And I think that's one way that you can improve the customer experience because they spend less time waiting. You can improve the effectiveness of your customer service agents.
I think bringing it to make sure that we're in the life science arena for this, I would say that the risk of getting it wrong is a lot higher than if, the chatbot on gap.com sends you to the wrong genes. And so making sure that it's set up right in the first place to retrieve that data, but then that has also been vetted and approved by all the appropriate licensed bodies to ensure that it's correct.
It's
for
pulling
what it
from a vetted source.
and that the answer is approved.
Yeah, and so that, yeah, there's a human in the loop there,
Mhm.
right? I think that's critical. New York got in trouble recently because they had, it was for policies around eviction. What could you get evicted? Someone asked, can you get evicted for not paying your rent? Right? It seems like, well, yeah, of course. Well, they were pulling from a database and of policies and using those responses to generate an answer. This is called RAG. This is a retrieval augmented generation, which is how people say that they're eliminating hallucinations. But in this case, what came back to the model were two different policies. One was a COVID era policy where they suspended that. And they said, no, they're suspending being evicted. There was a moratorium on being evicted for not paying your rent. And then the other one saying that it reinstated. And so those conflicted. And the answer that it gave back was, no, you can't be evicted. And so they were held liable for that incorrect response because it was customer facing.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of, so having that human in the middle would have prevented that, would have recognized, oh, this was COVID. This was a temporary policy. This is the current one. There's the blurb. Yes, you can.
Well, and that speaks to Liza's point about making sure that you're continuing to update the information that's available.
It would have removed that old one. It would only have it.
And I've heard people talking about also using AI to look at evidence, primary or empirical evidence about a drug or a method of action and all that stuff, and then being able to pull out marketing language that is really, because we all know, that's where the big rub is a lot of times in pharmaceutical, right? Where you're trying to come up with marketing that meets what the legal team or the provider team thinks is appropriate. Have you guys heard or done anything around that topic?
I personally haven't,
This is an area that I think is too early.
Mhm.
I think the risks involved are too great, both from if you make a mistake, someone could die sort of situation. And also, you're risking, yes, maybe it says this in this publication that's, this is true. This is what the science showed. But if that's not how the FDA has approved this medication, you risk making an off-label claim and getting in giant trouble. And so, again, having that human element, so you can generate those all you want, but then you have to know to go back and look at how's the medication approved? What is the way that this actually, what is it that the label actually says?
Yeah.
And does this stick to the truth of that?
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about how you're helping train your employees, or where are you referring them to beyond the compliance, because that obviously is very important, but just to help them understand the opportunity and the challenges of AI.
Well, right now there's several really good courses in LinkedIn. So you have to start with the basics, if you're going to use it, understand what it is. There's conferences that are now focused on AI. So that's another possibility to train the team. And I'm speaking specifically for the marketing team, right? So that's what we're doing. Some people are more advanced than others. So working with them, especially when there's content creation, it's like the words, right? But then also if you're using it to generate or find the citations for that specific thing, it's like, but you're citing something from 2002, like it's not relevant anymore. So we need to make sure that your work, so it's giving that feedback to the team and just teaching them, because I also used the the name is escaping
Deep
me.
research?
Yes, to do more in-depth data digging and data assembly. And I will say, without inputting anything confidential, and even for my own personal use, it's very good.
It pulls a lot together very quickly.
It's very
and
good.
gives you starting point
Yeah.
or it eliminates a lot of the dead ends of like reading one page.
And that's where you start transitioning the use of AI for just being, output. But a tool like that allows you to get the noise and you can start building strategy.
Well, it's like it's an assistant, right? It's
Exactly.
like an intern. You wouldn't like ask it to do something autonomously. But I mean, if it's a grad student or an intern, you say, go find me all the sources. You know what I'm talking about. I just want this. And you ask a few clarifying questions. You said, like rough specifications of what you want. Do some research on this. Get back to me with what you found, right? And then they like plow through the internet. And it automates and makes that, but you don't say, and then make a strategic decision and then communicate to everyone. No, you ingest it and you bring in your wisdom and your experience and your context, and then you make your decision based on that information, but accelerates it pretty effectively.
I wanted to ask a question to the audience and to you, something I have been thinking a lot about. I don't think AI necessarily sits solely with IT. And do we see the companies starting to create departments that are AI focused, where you have a mixture of legal and IT and whatever? We don't have
I think
that.
the governance board has to encompass the whole
The whole-
spectrum
yeah.
of domains that
Yes.
it's touched, because it is touching all of our lives. And that's
Yes.
one of the things that we're seeing as a pattern across the folks that we work with, is that they will have human resources, they will have marketing and sales. And the training that we do is like for the broad-based tools, for like ChatGPT, we have a ChatGPT team subscription. Everyone that asks gets a subscription to it. They get the latest models. We keep control of the data. So like if they leave the company, it doesn't walk out the door with them on their personal ChatGPT accounts, right? So it provides some guardrails. But another thing that we do is we have a part of the price for getting access to this tool is a regular sync up where we spend 30 minutes and we have a board of sticky notes that's like, how did it help you? What worked for you? What didn't? And what do you want to try? It's like, put it into those three things, and everyone gets together and shares. That destigmatizes it a little bit, because there was a little bit of a stigma associated with using it. It's like, oh, I can't tell anybody I'm using this. This was kind of like cheating. And so that sort of like shows that side of it to everyone and makes it transparent. It's like, I use it, and I'm like, oh, okay, Mitch uses it, so it's gonna be okay. And then I think we see across the organizations that these generative tools are really efficiency gains. It's like the rising tide that lifts all boats in your organization, raises them just a little bit. It's not like whoosh, the hype, like you're going to be 20%, your revenue is going to increase 20%. But it is, makes work better for people. You save 20 minutes, and what do you do with that 20 minutes?
Liza, I want to jump in. That's a really interesting question, because I don't have an answer. It's just I'm thinking through like this idea of innovation, right? There are some organizations that are very innovative, or there are some companies that have very innovative teams or emerging technology teams, right? That are oftentimes ahead of the curve, solving for stuff, but being typically more thoughtful about it because they're aware of the inherent challenges or pitfalls. But AI is different than innovation because it's pervasive now, right? So it's because
you have to socialize it. I think you have to infuse that. You have the people who are on the leading edge, who are like willing to experiment, and the people who are a little concerned, rightfully so. But like, and that needs to come together.
Well, I'm actually talking about so I do have a client that is doing AI in healthcare, and in talking with very educated providers who are now in IT or just very intelligent, innovative IT, there's still this disconnect of how to, what are the user requirements, who are giving the user requirements, like, anyway, it's just, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms,
Yeah.
but it's very interesting.
I do think that it needs to be something else. And not only that, because we're talking here strictly for marketing applications and communications applications, you know, whether it's gen or data or whatever. But companies that are going to start bringing AI, that's going into manufacturing departments, is going into data like
Yep.
warehouse. You know, so it's a much bigger thing.
Yep.
That me personally, I think companies need to start thinking if they're going to be bringing it in, how do we set the governance and where first of all, where is it going? How do we set the governance? And it needs to have its own resources
Mhm.
because to me, it's gonna be a monster.
Yep. Well, Mitch, I think, knowing some of your previous work, one of the things that was remarkable was the compliance group that you guys pulled together for the AI project you worked on in your past, which was,
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
So the premise behind the models that we built was to improve the effectiveness, and this effectiveness is an important thing of a care management organization to help people stay healthier, right? It's like truly preventative healthcare, not sick care, but healthcare, right? And one of the things that these models did is anticipate whether someone was at a rising risk for a preventable hospitalization due to the poor management of a chronic disease, right? So they weren't on top of the diabetes meds or COPD or CHF, and they were going to head towards a hospitalization. And one of the things that we had to cross at that point, because we were going to use this to prioritize care management outreach. We were going to use it for the nurses to call the right people at the right time to get them re-engaged with their primary care, get them back on their meds or whatever, right? We were picking a very small list of people out of a very large list of people, like millions of people. We give them 20 a week to call the most important ones. Before you do that, every time you edit, you're potentially introducing bias, right? You know, when you decide what to throw out, you're deciding what to keep, and we needed to make sure that we weren't making any socioeconomic racial disparities worse as a reflection of what was in the data that the models were trained on. And so before we went into production, we built a panel of people who were both clinical and legal and on the ethics side to validate that the use cases were appropriate and that the models were not biased. We would present the data where we evaluated, you know, based on socioeconomic disparities and so forth, and we can correct for those before those models went into production. And so that was sort of this, like, they weren't involved in the development. They weren't involved in the actual benefit of it. And so they didn't have a dog in the fight. They had this neutral perspective. And so and so in that way, it provided this sort of adjudication of, okay, it was our panel of, I forget what the medical council, the Care Path Medical Council probably was, we called it. But
I can't remember. But what I will say is that it was then, and I still think it's something that's kind of best in class now, because I mean, it was every 2 weeks was a meeting with this group, and they were constantly giving feedback on the model. Again, that was really remarkable. That takes a lot of time, but it was really important work, and it did absolutely benefit.
The most interesting thing about it was the perspective we took of bias is that whether a machine is making those decisions or a human is, you need to evaluate them both equally, right? And what we found that was interesting was if the model is making the decision of those like millions down to 20, and we need to correct for bias, we could do that in one place. If you had a team of 200 nurses who are, you know, subjectively making the decision, what if there's bias there? How do you fix that? You've got to figure out, you've got to retrain and change the implicit ideas that are going through those people's heads. And so, yes, bias in AI, specific AI models, when you have control over them, is something that you need to account for. But you can control for it in one place, which provides a really big opportunity for like making sure that we don't make disparities worse.
So I think now is a great time for us to transition to just the audience Q&A. I'm not sure if you already have some questions in chat that would be appropriate, or why don't we do one from chat, one from the room, and we'll kind of go between the two and work our way through.
We have one in the chat and it says, are there any tools and use cases for market and competitive research?
I think so.
Yeah.
So I think the way that Liza was describing it, being able to say like, who are the people in this space? And then being able to see, you know, who that's pulling, and then you can do a comparison. Are those really your competitors? But that's probably the best place to start is looking at, you know, having it pull who are your direct competitors.
Yes.
And also seeing then what are their positioning statements looking like? And you can look for themes again, that can use a model.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say a lot of the same thing, but understanding, I feel like this is where ChatGPT, Gemini really does a great job, because it's just going out and grabbing the information from websites. And that's what I had to do when I was first starting to understand how to do competitive analysis. I would go and see, what are they saying? What's the product features and capabilities that they're saying, and create a spreadsheet, and then do the quadrant and do the, like, where's the white space, right? Like all that stuff. It's really good for that. Like it really does. I mean, you do, again, you know, you're going to have some anomalies, or maybe it doesn't scrape the right, there are going to be mistakes, but it's not a super high risk situation. But it allows you to consume a large amount of information and actually do the hard work of figuring out where you're going to place that company.
And you can give it ideas of where to look too, and what to stay away from.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like you can use some of the deep research tools to generate your list of sources, and then you can say, using these, you can take those. There's a really good tool called Notebook LM that you can use that will only pull from those specific sources that you provided. So you can start with this set of use of websites and documents and PDFs and stuff that you say, okay, boil this down for me, find the similarities, find the discrepancies. Whereas how can I segment this data out properly?
Yeah.
Instead of just hoping that instead of just like hoping that it'll like find the thing that you need to find.
And you can ask it to generate an Excel sheet for you, and you can download it. So just, you can ask it to provide you the data in different ways. So, and I have learned that in the hard way. So just by trial and error.
Do we have any questions in the room? And certainly okay if we don't.
So there's new products coming out every day, right? That's one of the things that's going on. So how do you go about, if you're looking at a new product that's out there and you want to try it within your company, and with a lot of the IP issues and things that were kind of touched on a little bit there, what are some hints or things that you can do of finding out what I should use it for and what I shouldn't use it for that product versus this product? Obviously, assuming it's paid licenses and stuff, not the free versions.
I mean, the first step is really having that first call with whatever company you're evaluating, and having them walk you through the platform, and you bring people that, because I don't know everything, right? So if we're looking to bring a tool that needs to have an integration with our CRM, for example, I need to bring the commercial IT person that actually is responsible for that system and understands that system, so that we can do an evaluation. And we talk to different ones, and she looks at what is going to, if it's for us, what we want, but it needs to be not only what we want, but what is compatible with the other systems that we have and is in compliance to what we have. And then we go through the process.
Specifically, just Zoom. Zoom will transcribe and stuff like that and listen to the whole call as an example of a whole series of sweet things, because no one likes to do meeting minutes anymore, right? So a lot of people are using it for that. But where do you draw the line on something like that it's just listening to a meeting and it could have picked up something maybe you didn't want it to know? And be sure that you know, is it, if it's on AWS, they have security procedures and it's anonymous, like, what are the kinds of things you should look for, you know?
I want to throw something in because it's being someone who's always ridden the line between marketing and sales and technology.
Yeah.
I'm the most non-technological person you ever meet, but I can always interface with people. But it's all about user requirements. Like, what are your goals, or what are your, and you can have, you know, kind of emerging goals, but you have some real goals you're trying to, you know, like what are you have to have, and then what are some nice to have. But until you define those user requirements from all the key stakeholders, you do not compare apples to apples. And I see this all the time.
But I think with things like Zoom and the meeting transcription stuff, you want to know like where the data lives, where it's going, what in when you are they using it for other purposes. And typically paid subscriptions, you know, they'll be pretty transparent. If they're not transparent, that's a red flag, right? But they need to be transparent about the models that they're using. That, you know, the text to speech models, there can also be language models behind that do summarization. You need to, you know, those types of things are important considerations. So something that we do at XBy2 is, you know, they'll say, you know, evaluate a vendor for us with our IT system, right? So here's our system. So we go in and we understand the context of what they're trying to get out of it and what their systems are like, how the integrations work, and what exposures they might have to sort of select them. You know, apart from that, is, you know, it's just like, okay,
Wild West.
tiptoe into it.
Well,
And it's overwhelming.
but I think you also need to get your legal team involved to have them reading the terms of use of the place that you're considering using, and say like, and it's got to be a lawyer who knows you, right? And understands how you're protecting your data. So having somebody that's looking at it and saying, you know, this looks okay, or I don't know, I'm not crazy about this. You don't want to expose yourself to, you know, potentially voiding any confidentiality because it was saved on a server that you didn't have control of.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to just add that again, like if you have a sales team that's using Zoom to interact with customers and doing presentations, and you want that data to be used in other systems, like those are the types of things you need to think about, just so you can make sure that you're not having 15 different technologies when you can have 3, right? But it takes a long time to get those user requirements done. But boy, when you have them done and you're involving the legal team, you're involving a data scientist who understands the ethics, or you know, all those people are critical if you're trying to buy a technology in that way.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that you are going to be building policy in your company as you go. Like I want to give you a very simple example. Have you ever heard of the Meta glasses? So I admit I have a pair. These are not Meta glasses. But as I was thinking, you know, if we give tours of our manufacturing facility, we don't allow anyone to come into the facility, take pictures, or record. It's because, you know, we could have, you know, IP protected setup, or there could be customer information, or, you know, many various reasons. How do you manage that? How do you know that a person that's walking into your facility is not wearing those glasses? Because all you have to do is say, hey, may I take pictures? I mean, seriously, and you hear it and it stores it in your phone. So you're going to be making policy, and it's very important to stay ahead of that. You know, when Teams release the transcription, and then it will give you, it would rate you and how you did in the call, like, oh, you didn't say anything, you suck, basically. It was a problem though, and we immediately had to set up like a policy in the company saying we cannot have this, because it was freaking out some of our customers, where they were like, we're not joining a call if you have that thing on. Okay, so.
Well, I think that's a good point too, when you're evaluating a system, also thinking about who are the people that are interacting with you that are outside of your company, and what impact that might have on them as well, including any service agreements that you've got set up either for, you know, your potential customers or people that you're working with as vendors.
And I think people engage with authenticity, right? And, you know, whether it's coming across sounding like a bot that will cause them to disengage. Or, even with your, in meetings, right, you might have a mess behind you, or if you're on a Zoom meeting, sometimes it's kind of okay. It's like you're a real person. And I think people want to know that there's another real person that is behind that interaction. That's why people rail against terrible chatbots, because it's like, oh, just let me talk to a person. I need to speak to a representative, agent. And it's that desire to have a real meaningful interaction with the person. And I think those are some of the things that, are important when you think about how you use these tools. It's like get homogenized and.
We have
Alright.
another.
Next question says, how do you ensure precision and quality over quantity?
It's a good one.
Yeah. I don't think there's.
Yeah, I mean, humans, it's having well-educated people that are looking at everything that comes out. This is not a situation yet where you're going to be able to replace your communications team or your scientists or your lawyers or your clinicians. You have to have a person that's making sure that this is true and accurate stuff. And this becomes a tool, hopefully, for them to be able to be faster. But you still have to do data verification every step of the way.
You need to have workflows, right? Established workflows, and that goes part with how you train your team and how you define how you're using the tool. I will never sacrifice quality for quantity. So you need to become like you have to be realistic. Why would you want to push out so much content? Is it because you're being asked, or is it because, oh, I have this great tool that is now spitting all these things? So I mean, you need to really define what that is, and then know the limitations, because you're going to need to have a person or persons that's going to have to review that content. And as much as I love AI and I think it's a great tool if properly used and it's going to continue to evolve, it will never replace people. And maybe people listening are laughing at me, but I don't think it will ever replace people. You need the human subconscious, unconsciousness to be in there. It's a machine.
I think as you move up the value chain from quantity to quality, it naturally involves more effort, right? More effort in finding what is the answer that you're really looking for. Why are you asking that question? And that takes a little bit of time. You're not going to generate a billion of those, and you're definitely not going to trust them, right? And so generative is quality or quantity, right? So it just like keeps on coming at you. But it's not there yet of moving up that value chain. And that's been the home of the predictive models, sort of the more traditional AI models, where you're like, okay, we know what the performance, we know what the accuracy and precision of these models are for these decisions. They aren't generally useful, but they have a lot of leverage, right? And so when you start having more leverage, you have to there's no shortcuts to measuring precision, knowing how they perform. And that's just not a space that generative is in right now.
And I think that's a good argument for making sure that not only do you have people that are qualified for their jobs with the right kind of education, but also very well experienced to be able to tell, if you're reading a bunch of information and it all sounds really good, but 25% of it is potentially wrong, it's going to be easier to sort that out if you already know stuff.
Right. So we have a model that we're deploying a model in hospitals that is anticipating a physician's decision to admit. And we know that it's over 90% accurate and very precise, anticipates it 2 hours before the workup is finalized. It can do all this like downstream work. And then we come up against these other models that are like, yeah, we do it where they were like 60%. That means like 1 in 3, they're wrong. Nobody's going to use that model, right? Nobody's going to use that because 1 in 3 times it's wrong. 1 in 20, then they'll work a little bit ahead and like it makes for a smoother workflow. So knowing the performance of models and having and knowing the people that it impacts is like absolutely critical before you use them to drive decisions or drive action. I think that's what, the question is getting at is like, how do you do that? I don't think there are any shortcuts.
And they asked the follow-up question as well, if we have time for it.
Yeah, let's come back to that one. Let's
Okay.
go to you next. I think in the green, you had a shirt.
Yes,
Have a green shirt on.
this is for Crystal. Could you please describe like your, you said you were a curmudgeon? Was that
Oh,
it?
yeah, very
Okay.
much so.
Could you give us examples of what your concerns are?
So even in the best trained models, in medical content, it's wrong 23% of the time.
Generative models.
Generative models. Well, and we're in a marketing group, right? And so we need to be thinking about the context of that. So if you're asking for content to be created based on information that is a data set that's provided, if it's going to be wrong 25% of the time, that's a problem. I have concerns that people are going to think that this is a shortcut and you'll be able to do more or replace with people that are less educated or less experienced, or maybe have not had a situation where they saw somebody get a letter from FDA and the havoc that can cause, right? And so when people are working on stuff, they can make mistakes. And when you are talking about the difference in millions of dollars in people's lives, I think a word like may in medical communications, if left out, can mean something. The word significant means something in a medical and scientific context that it doesn't in other places. And so making sure that anytime you're bringing in AI, you have people that understand the regulations, that understand the science, and are there thinking about how do we protect the end people of this, right? In life science, that means we're talking about human lives. And so to me, we should all be more curmudgeonly. It is our responsibility to protect the humans around us, to make sure that we're making the right decisions, that we've got the right science out there, and it's portrayed in a way that is accurate and to the label.
Oh, Adrian.
Okay, yes. So it says, what are your thoughts on leaders who dissolve their communications and marketing teams in favor of AI only to later regret it?
Well, they give their comeuppance.
It says Forbes recently published a piece on this. As someone on a data metrics team, I would expect such major decisions to be backed by thorough analysis. So how do these reversals happen, especially when ROI is negatively impacted?
I really want to take this one. Yeah, so if communications and marketing professionals are dismissed or taken out and replaced with AI today, when, by the way, as much as I love it, it's not there, it means that your leadership never thought marketing and communications was important to begin with. And that's a problem. And we know that for many organizations, marketing and communications is viewed as a money pit where you throw money and these people just go and have cha-cha-cha parties and that's all we do, and they don't understand. And everybody can do our job, because I'm sure that everybody in this room has had somebody, well, why did you use that picture for the post? And I'm like, so I think that's the first thing to think about, is your organization or the organization just didn't value it.
They got what they deserved.
They
in a way.
They got
Right.
what they deserve. And of course, and obviously they didn't do their own due diligence. It's the same thing as when you have a marketing group and you start replacing people that have a lot of knowledge, tribal knowledge, and you start bringing, I'm all for the new generation, don't get me wrong. But there's certain things, it's like AI and training it. There's certain things that you can just never replace because you don't have the experience. So those organizations are not valuing the experience and they're trusting something. Good luck to them. That's what I would say.
They fell victim to the hype, right? They fell victim to the marketing hype that all of the people all the VC money that's like chasing this thing want them to believe, right? We're all victim to it. We're all potentially victim to it to some degree. And we just have to kind of see what are the forces at play and like, okay, is this real? It's like, no.
There's a lack of education too, right? So you're making a decision to scrap your entire marketing and communications team. Like, who's making that decision and how much that they actually want to understand what your team is doing? And two, what AI is going to do to replace those people. So that's definitely an education process that needs to happen, or obviously that didn't happen.
Doesn't sound like good leadership. There was a question on this side. Yes.
Great discussion. Thank you so much. We're here talking about content creation and how, because there is ease of using ChatGPT, let's say, or any form of generative AI to create content. And we're also saying, hey, you put some content out there, I see the vocabulary and I can find out this is it. This is coming from chat, right? But you're also seeing on the other side, the question there, I think the companies are trying to cut off their communications marketing. Their HR teams are also being cut out. And the people that are being selected are literally getting selected from choosing the resume that has words from AI. So are we not contradicting ourselves?
I think it makes everyone more productive, right? And, so it makes how many more mediocre, people are there than mid-level. It's just experience and talent and drive. The thing I like, hard work is always going to be hard, right? You just might be able to be more effective at it. And these tools can help you be more effective, and it's going to raise the efficiency and effectiveness of everyone, right? And so I think to combat that, it's important to learn how to use them wisely, and how to use them to leverage what you're really good at. Are you paid to type? I mean, are you compensated because you type really fast? No. What is the value, and examine what is that true value, and how can you get the chat models or those models to do the laundry so that you can do the art, right? So it's that trade-off of operating at the top of your license.
I think what you were also asking was about the ability to determine if something was written by chat or not. And I know that was an earlier conversation. So on NPR yesterday, I was listening and they had someone on talking about this conversation in higher education. And it's a real challenge, and they're getting it really wrong, where there's so many other criteria that make people's language potentially seem like it's ChatGPT generated, but it's not.
Yeah.
And so it is, what I took away from it is very, just inconsistent and not conclusive as to
being able to detect.
So I do think there's this ethical conversation then that really needs to be had, even with 13-year-old boys like I have, which is like, you cannot do this and expect to learn, and you're going to find yourself, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But right? I mean, but you would hope that these universities, who are obviously educating lots of people, would really come at this from a much more collaborative, ethical place.
There's some places that require you to use ChatGPT. There are some you're going to use it, and then
I think we're in a place, and this happens in medicine all the time, where a tool is available, but we haven't set up how the ethical way to use it is. We're building it as we go.
We got ahead of our skis here.
Yeah. So when I was in clinical practice, we would often, just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And I think what you're talking about speaks very much to that, is the ethical issues in utilizing AI to screen resumes is really challenging.
Yeah. Well, there have been people who have had lawsuits that won against them because they use AI inappropriately to screen resumes, and there was an implicit bias.
I think we have to go online for the next one, and then how about one more after that?
We're good online, yeah.
And maybe the last question.
Yes, this is great, and thank you for being here. So my perspective is bridging business and technology, and that's would have been the baseline of my practice since 1996. And then we started calling it digital transformation. But what I observed coming into that space, my first client was a client that had an IT organization within their business, but it was very isolated. And the dynamics between the IT and technology and the rest of the company was very broken typically. So I'm wondering, in the space where we are going after AI, how is that relationship, because it's enabling technology, and do you still have the challenge of how you work effectively with your technology resources?
I think absolutely. I think it even more emphasizes that we need all to be working on our emotional intelligence and our interpersonal skills, especially with more of us working from home all the time. You know, I think it becomes more important to communicate better, communicate more effectively and human to human, which also means not Slack, not email, you know, making sure that everybody truly understands what everybody's job is and that you're working well together.
So you still have an IT group, but they're actively
Yeah,
involved. with the
integrated
work that you're
in
doing
everything.
with AI.
The size of the company and the culture of the company is also going to help determine that, right? And what is the function of your IT? Because you're going to have your help desk people that make them your best friend. I always used to bring IT people cookies, you know. That's a pro tip right there. And then you have, you have IT that's focused on automation. So it depends what your function is and what that IT function is, because the automation team has to be really connected to the manufacturing team. The IT team has to be connected to the marketing team whenever we're like downloading or requiring the different platforms or software, whatever. I think some companies are better than others at that. But you have to look at the function because
So AI doesn't add a particular different dynamic to all.
I don't want to, not yet. I would say not yet. I suspect that as this thing continues to evolve and adoption happens more and more, yes. I think right now, to quote here, who should be your best friend is legal.
I know that you have a call at 1:30.
Yeah.
So thank you guys very much. This has been really, I hope everyone learned something. I certainly did. That was the whole intent, is to just share. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, panelists, for taking time out of your busy schedules. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to stick around for a little bit, but like I said, I understand you gotta. Thank you guys.